Have you ever just known something was going to happen right before it did? Or maybe you hesitated taking your usual route to work, and then, boom, you find out later the whole road was blocked. Well, take a second to think about that. Aldous Huxley actually hit the nail on the head when he described this kind of weird liminal space. He said, there are things known and there are things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. And you know what? We all have these doors. The untapped potential sitting literally right at the edge of our everyday awareness is frankly staggering. So today, we are going to learn how to actually open them. Welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here with us. Today, we're diving into the absolutely fascinating concepts from Mark Boccuzzi's work on unlocking your natural psi. Now, right off the bat, let's clear something up. Psychic abilities? They aren't some sci-fi superpower reserved for a chosen few. And no, you definitely don't need to be bitten by a radioactive spider to get them. They are actually a natural, totally untapped reservoir inside every single one of us. Think of your mind like a highly advanced radio receiver. Most of the time, we are just stuck on one single frequency, the relentless, buzzing static of modern life. You know the drill. Emails, endless notifications, commuting, the daily grind. It creates this massive wall of mental noise. But what if you could just reach out and turn the dial? What if you could tune out that static and tune into a whole spectrum of channels that reveal these deeper, invisible connections all around us? Well, that is exactly what we're going to figure out how to do today. Okay, here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start by demystifying your natural psi, then move on to mindfulness and quieting the noise. After that, we'll look at science, belief, and fear. Then we'll cover heart-centered psi amplifiers, dive into creativity and the unseen web, and finally wrap up with how to live an intentional psychic life. Let's get right into it. Kicking things off with Section 1, demystifying your natural psi. So our main goal right out of the gate isn't actually to hand you a bunch of brand new, extraordinary tools. It's really about stripping away the noise, the doubts, and all those distractions that hide what's actually been dormant inside you all along. Let's start with a term you've probably used 100 times, intuition. It's that quiet knowing or a sudden flash of clarity that doesn't need any conscious reasoning. It's exactly like that traffic example we talked about earlier. But what does it actually feel like? Well, intuition rarely screams at you. Usually it's more like a visceral tightening in your stomach, or maybe a sudden, totally illogical urge to call someone, or even a physical feeling of resistance when you're making a decision that looks perfectly fine on paper. It's a subtle, physical nudge, trying to guide you before your analytical brain even has time to process the data. Next up, we've got telepathy. Now, go ahead and forget the comic book versions of mind reading, where you're hearing people's inner monologues echoing in your head. Real telepathy is essentially an exchange of thoughts, or honestly, more commonly emotions, without a single spoken word. Just think of it as incredibly deep, energetic empathy. Seriously, have you ever walked into a room and the air just felt incredibly heavy, and then you realize two people there had literally just been arguing? Or maybe you're sitting with a friend and suddenly you just feel this wave of sadness that isn't even yours, but because you felt it, you're able to comfort them before they even shed a tear. That energetic resonance, actually feeling another person's internal state within your own body, that is telepathy in everyday action. When we have precognition, which is basically perceiving events or information before they actually happen. And we can demystify this just by looking at how it usually shows up. Spoiler alert, it's almost never a perfectly clear crystal ball vision. Way more often, it happens in your sleep, in the dream state. Why dreams, you ask? Well, because when you're asleep, your highly analytical, super skeptical conscious mind finally powers down for the night. And this lets your subconscious just run completely uninhibited, processing incredibly complex probabilities and tiny environmental cues to project an event that hasn't even unfolded yet in your waking life. It's kind of like your brain's ultimate predictive software, just running quietly in the background. And that brings us to this absolutely beautiful concept coined by the famous psychologist Carl Jung, synchronicity. These are those meaningful coincidences that just completely defy statistical probability. Think about a time you randomly thought of a super specific phrase, or maybe an old friend you haven't talked to in like 10 years. And then, 10 seconds later, your phone buzzes. You look down and it's a text from them containing that exact phrase. That right there is synchronicity. It's not just random chance. Jung believed these synchronicities often act as confirmation that you are exactly where you need to be. It's almost like a little sign that your internal state is perfectly aligned with your external environment, showing us this deeply interconnected web. Now, there is a really vital distinction we need to make about how all this manifests. On one hand, we have spontaneous psi, or SPI, which happens totally naturally and unexpectedly. This is that sudden, unbidden flash of insight or the random text message synchronicity we just talked about. It completely catches you by surprise. But on the other side, we have intentional psi, or IPI. This is when you are consciously invoking or directing these abilities with deliberate focus and sustained practice. And honestly, the whole goal of this explainer is to help you build the mental muscles you need to transition from just being startled by spontaneous flashes of SPI to confidently sitting at the controls and actively invoking IPI whenever you need some clarity. Moving right along to Section 2, Mindfulness, Quieting the Noise. So to actually hear these subtle, high-frequency psi signals, we first have to turn down the blaring volume of our modern mental chatter. And there's some deeply fascinating neuroscience behind this. You see, most of our waking life is spent in the beta brainwave state. Beta is fast-paced. It's the frequency of deadlines, heavy traffic, and anxiety. And it completely drowns out subtle intuition. But when you practice mindfulness, you literally shift your brain's electrical activity. You start generating slower alpha and theta frequencies. Alpha states quiet down that inner critic and reduce the heavy influence of your analytical mind. And theta states, they go even deeper, opening the door directly to your subconscious. So together, shifting out of beta and into alpha and theta creates this perfect, quiet, acoustic environment for psi insights to clearly manifest. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, okay, but how do I actually make that shift in the middle of a crazy busy day? Well, here is a highly practical, pocket-sized tool you can use literally anywhere to instantly ground yourself. It's called the 5 senses exercise. Whenever you feel overwhelmed or disconnected, just pause. Look around and name 5 things you can clearly see. Then feel your environment and name 4 things you can physically touch. Listen closely for 3 distinct sounds you can hear. Find 2 things you can smell, and finally, notice 1 thing you can taste. Why does this work so well? Because by intensely grounding your focus in your physical senses, you forcefully pull your brain right out of that anxious beta state and anchor it to the present moment. It clears the mental static, creating the exact opening your non-physical senses need to finally pick up a signal. That brings us to Section 3, Science, Belief, and Fear. Let's be real for a second. A lot of people are highly skeptical about this topic. And honestly, that makes total sense. We're taught to only trust what we can measure in a lab. But the field of parapsychology actually bridges the gap between hard, rigorous science and these profound human experiences. In fact, after reviewing over a century of experimental data, in the peer-reviewed journal American Psychologist, Dr. Edsel Cardena concluded that psi effects are statistically significant and completely comparable to results in widely accepted scientific fields. I mean, we are talking about decades of rigorous, independent laboratory studies here. Experiments like the famous Ganzfeld telepathy tests, or trials using random number generators that show how human intention can subtly alter supposedly random mechanical outputs. The data proves that phenomena like telepathy and precognition consistently and reliably exceed the boundaries of pure chance. So for the skeptics out there, the science is undeniably there. Yet, even with the science staring us in the face, our deeply ingrained societal conditioning can still make us afraid to even explore this stuff. We're taught to fear what we don't understand, right? But overcoming this fear of your own natural potential is absolutely crucial for tuning your dial. Because if you're afraid of the signal, your subconscious will automatically block it. It's just protecting you. So here's a super simple meditation to help release that fear. First, find a quiet, safe space. Breathe deeply and slowly. Now visualize a warm, golden light surrounding you, acting like this comforting, protective barrier. As you slowly exhale, actively imagine pushing out the fear, the doubt, and the stigma. Just let it go. And as you inhale, draw in quiet confidence. Then, internally repeat a grounding affirmation to yourself. Something like, I am safe, I release fear, and I openly embrace the positive possibilities of my own awareness. It's a game changer for sure. All right, moving into Section 4, Heart-Centered Psi Amplifiers. You see, advanced emotional states like humility, gratitude, compassion, and love, they don't just make you a kinder person overall. In the realm of parapsychology, these emotions actually act as massive, high-powered amplifiers for your psychic signal. And that entire amplification process starts entirely with how you treat yourself. Practicing self-compassion is absolutely vital. When you heighten your sensitivity to the energies and emotions around you, you definitely run the risk of empathic overload. If you don't know how to protect your energy, you're going to face some serious emotional exhaustion. And that is exactly why you have to acknowledge your own feelings without judgment and really embrace your imperfections. But more importantly, you must set rigid, healthy boundaries.
Sometimes just saying no to draining situations is exactly what you need to preserve your energy. Keeping this emotional balance prevents burnout and makes sure your intuitive channels stay clear, open, and healthy.
Next up is Section 5, Creativity and the Unseen Web.
Engaging in creative activities, whether that's sketching, free writing, playing music, or honestly even just gardening, naturally opens the doors to profound inspiration and seamless psi-awareness. We live in a culture that loves to dismiss idle daydreaming as a complete waste of time. But actually, mind wandering is a remarkably powerful tool. When you just let your mind drift without some rigid agenda, your brain activates what neuroscientists call the default mode network. This is a crucial flow state. Your subconscious is finally off the leash. It's free to synthesize disparate ideas and tune into that subtle, unseen web of existence that connects us all. You know that brilliant aha moment or that sudden perfect solution you get while you're just taking a warm shower? Yeah, that is exactly what happens when your intuition successfully breaks through a relaxed, wandering mind.
And finally, Section 6, Living an Intentional Psychic Life.
So the ultimate goal of all this isn't to turn you into some mystical guru. It's seamless integration. You absolutely do not need to pack your bags and isolate yourself in a cave on a mountaintop to be deeply spiritually connected. No way. You can integrate every single one of these practices right into your daily balanced rhythm, exactly where you are today. So I want you to ask yourself right now, how is the universe whispering to you? Take a real moment to genuinely reflect on the quiet, incredibly subtle, and often completely overlooked signals you receive every single day. We've talked a lot about stripping away the mental noise to finally hear the signal. But the really beautiful truth here? Those signals are already there. They have always been there, just patiently trying to catch your attention.
To help you answer that question, I want you to keep a close eye out for these practical signposts moving forward. And remember, we're not talking about supernatural events here. These are entirely natural manifestations of your own awareness. Notice those visceral gut feelings in your physical body when you're faced with a tough choice. Watch out for those sudden, unexplainable flashes of insight that just effortlessly cut right through your confusion. Pay really close attention to the empathic information you sense from a coworker or a loved one before they even open their mouth to speak. Try keeping a journal by your bed so you can write down those vivid, highly symbolic dreams the exact moment you wake up. And finally, just be deeply mindful of those uncanny synchronicities that seem far too precise and far too meaningful to merely be a roll of the cosmic dice.
All right, we have covered the foundational science, the grounding practices, and the vital shifts in mindset you need to unlock what has been sitting dormant inside you this entire time. The noise is fading, the static is clearing, your dial is completely in your hands, and it is ready to be tuned. So the only question left to ask is, what frequency will you intentionally listen to today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep your mind open, fiercely trust your own intuition, and I will see you next time.